As we track thousands of Russian tanks confirmed lost in Ukraine, we must look beyond the raw numbers to see the real tactical disaster. It is the brutal, systematic way these armored columns are lured into kill zones before achieving any operational breakthrough. During Rasputitsa, the notorious Ukrainian mud season, the terrain does not need to destroy a main battle tank directly. It only needs to force heavy armor onto narrow, predictable roads where waiting Ukrainian reconnaissance drones can easily predict their arrival. From the hatch, that road looks like the only safe path through flooded fields. But from the air, it is a high-visibility target corridor drawn directly across the tactical grid. A single landmine can instantly disable the lead vehicle's track. One FPV drone strikes the vulnerable engine deck or turret roof. Then heavy artillery or HIMARS rockets rain down on the trapped vehicles stacked behind it. Within minutes, a high-speed assault formation is reduced to a line of static, burning targets. This is the critical development. Ukrainian forces are not just using drones for isolated strikes. They have fused the mud, mines, drones, and precision artillery into one synchronized hunting system. The critical threat here goes far beyond the destruction of Russian armor. The vital question is whether any modern military can execute heavy mechanized assaults when they lose control of both the ground below and the airspace above. Rasputitsa is the grueling muddy season, sweeping across Ukraine and Eastern Europe as thawing snow and rain transform solid fields into a massive muddy trap. The mud does not directly destroy these multi-million-dollar machines, but it strips away their ultimate battlefield advantage: tactical mobility. On this eastern front, that vulnerability is exploited long before the first shot is fired. An armored column advances toward a forward line. From inside the lead tank, the narrow road appears to be their only viable path. The surrounding fields look clear, but the terrain is completely saturated, soft, and far too weak for heavy combat vehicles weighing dozens of tons. The crew remains confident in their armor, their high-horsepower engine, and their heavy firepower. But tactical capability is useless if the vehicle cannot maneuver freely. The deep mud becomes a silent physical barrier, and once that corridor is set, the armored formation loses all operational freedom. They are confined to a single lane that Ukrainian forces can map, pre-target, and patiently watch. This is where you and I watch the trap close. A tank commander might try to break formation, spread out, or flank through the fields. But the terrain denies that option. If a driver steers off-road, the heavy tracks immediately sink into the earth. If they attempt to power through, the tank simply digs itself deeper. If the column attempts to deploy, critical support vehicles and infantry carriers bog down before ever reaching the engagement zone. So the convoy remains locked on the paved route, a decision that seals their tactical fate. A tight village road, a dense forest track, or a bridge approach quickly becomes a lethal choke point amidst the mud. Heavy armor must proceed in a single file, and every tactical delay exposes their route to aerial surveillance. What is a severe mobility problem for the crew becomes a clear targeting solution for enemy operators above. Ukrainian drone units do not require total battlefield surveillance. They only need to monitor the specific bottlenecks where heavy armor has no other tactical option. A sharp turn near a tree line, a narrow dry strip next to a flooded field, or a single bridge crossing becomes far more tactically valuable than miles of impassable open country. As Russian armored units repeatedly force the same routes, their operational pattern is laid bare. Consequently, we are seeing a battlefield where the mud itself acts as an extension of Ukraine's sensor network. It transmits no electronic signals and guides no missiles, but it limits Russian operational freedom to the advantage of the defense. Once the route is identified, transit schedules are easily established. With the timeline confirmed, the entire column is kept under constant surveillance long before reaching the active line of contact. This is precisely why the traditional concept of armor acting as a rapid armored fist is obsolete. A main battle tank is lethal when it can maneuver, pivot, and execute shock and awe to rupture defensive lines. But when pinned to a single lane under persistent drone eyes, its massive size becomes a fatal vulnerability. The footprint, weight, and thermal signature that once projected power now make the column an easy target to track. At this stage of the war, engagements are not won simply by armor thickness or caliber size. Success depends on who controls the terrain, who sees the movement first, and how effectively we can adapt to this new era of warfare. Once a route becomes predictable, we see Ukrainian forces transforming that corridor into a prepared kill zone with drones, mines, and pre-sighted artillery. Kyiv does not wait for a Russian armored column to reach the zero line before initiating contact. This tactical trap starts earlier, with reconnaissance drones rising above transit roads, tree lines, open fields, and ruined villages that heavy armor must navigate. From those altitudes, the battlefield is mapped by patterns of movement. A route used once is noted, a route used twice is actively watched. Any subsequent transit transforms it into an active ambush site. Remember, a drone's primary mission is not always kinetic strike. Its primary mission is tracking movement. It identifies where Russian vehicles decelerate, where they pivot, where they avoid mud, and where the terrain funnels them into choke points. While a tank crew sees only mud on the flanks, the aerial operator identifies a clear tactical pattern forming. That pattern is vital intelligence. Heavy armor cannot conceal its weight, acoustic signature, dust clouds, or track marks for long. Once verified, Ukrainian units prepare the next layer of defense. Anti-tank mines are seeded along high-probability approach vectors, allowing artillery batteries to hold fire until targets are visually confirmed instead of firing blindly. On some fronts, drones deploy remote mining assets or identify the exact GPS coordinates where a mine will be most lethal. The objective is not blocking every road. The goal is shutting down the specific corridor. The enemy is already funneling their forces through. This redefines the modern minefield. It is no longer just a passive, silent hazard buried in the dirt. It operates as a dynamic, integrated system guided by constant aerial surveillance. When the lead tank enters the target zone and strikes a mine, that initial explosion is just the opening move. A sheared track, the abrupt halt, and rising smoke confirm to Ukrainian commanders that the enemy column has entered the pre-registered kill box. For the Russian assault element, the next seconds are pure chaos. Their lead vehicle is disabled, blocking the primary advance path. The trailing driver cannot simply maneuver off-road because the thick mud risks bogging down or exposing them to secondary mines. Reversing is nearly impossible with trailing assets pushing forward, throwing the entire convoy into tactical disarray. What was once an advance route is now a corridor with no escape. This is where panic sets in. Once the column stalls, overhead assets pin their position and guide precision fires. Any attempt to bypass the disabled lead vehicle threatens to bog down secondary armor in the soft terrain. If they wait for armored recovery vehicles, those retrieval assets simply become secondary high-value targets in a pre-sighted kill zone. Every hesitation buys Ukraine time, and time is fatal under direct aerial observation. Let's break down the tactical synergy here. Every asset directly supports the next. Drones identify the route. Mines force the immobilization. That immobilization creates a stationary target. Then FPV drones, heavy bombers, artillery, or HIMARS strike with absolute confidence. The targeted armor is no longer moving through open territory. They are pinned where their momentum is shattered, their tactical spacing has collapsed, and their combat options are completely exposed. This explains why terrain control is paramount in this phase. The Ukrainian military is not simply holding a line on a map, they are actively dictating how Russian forces are permitted to approach defensive lines. A highway, a bridge, a hard-packed track, or a dry corridor between muddy fields becomes far more than an advance route. It becomes the exact spot where a column is halted, targeted, and broken. The lesson for us is simple, yet brutal. Reconnaissance assets detect the column early. Mines force an emergency halt at the worst tactical location. Precision fire then transforms that stalled convoy into a fatal kill zone. The tactical collapse begins when the lead main battle tank strikes an anti-tank mine on a narrow track. The explosion tears the drive sprocket apart. The disabled tank swerves across the road, and thick smoke billows from the column. What appeared to be a clear approach seconds ago is now a steel barricade trapping every vehicle behind it. That lead vehicle is not merely another asset. It dictates the speed, proves the path is cleared of mines, and serves as the primary vector for the column. Once it halts, the trailing vehicles instantly lose all tactical momentum. The second tank slams on its brakes. The armored personnel carrier behind it closes the gap. Heavy logistics trucks further back fail to decelerate in time, compressing the line. Inside the column, complete chaos erupts instantly. Drivers see smoke billow ahead, but they are blind to the tactical reality. Radio nets are flooded with frantic chatter. Every crew freezes, waiting for orders before making a move that could get them killed. The flanks look wide open, but the mud makes it a death trap for any heavy armor leaving the paved road. This is precisely where operational control begins to unravel. The second tank cannot bypass the wreck without bogging down in the mud. Behind them, a choked road prevents any clean retreat. Sitting idle just buys Ukrainian surveillance drones more time to orbit overhead. None of these options restores their momentum. Every hesitation gives defenders a cleaner shot. To Ukrainian observers, that disabled lead tank is now a fixed reference point. Drone pilots no longer have to track a moving convoy. They have a bottleneck, a blocked route, and a massive pileup of targets. What we are seeing on the ground is an armored column turned sitting duck, trapped with zero escape routes. Now, the armored recovery vehicle must execute the most hazardous mission. The crew has to crawl down that exact pre-sighted road and halt next to the wreck. They are slow, exposed, and easily spotted from the air. Their objective is to tow the lead tank and clear the lane, but this rescue attempt creates a high-value target. If that retriever gets hit, the entire operation grinds to a halt. Meanwhile, the infantry packed inside the armored personnel carriers faces a different nightmare. Armor offers protection, but these stalled vehicles are no longer moving fast enough to keep them safe. The moment soldiers dismount, they step onto open terrain heavily monitored by eyes in the sky. Sprinting for the tree line feels like survival, but aerial recon tracks their path straight to cover. As time ticks away, unit cohesion shatters. One crew sits paralyzed while another attempts to crawl backward. A commander orders a push, but the advance route is completely obstructed. Every second of delay makes this bottleneck more lucrative for Ukrainian fire control. Artillery batteries receive precise coordinates, while drone bombers and FPV teams pick off weak spots at their leisure. This is how a single thrown track triggers a cascade of tactical failures. The casualty list extends far beyond that lead tank. They have lost speed, tactical spacing, command, and escape. A mechanized assault relies on momentum to shock and overwhelm defending forces, but when that momentum stalls under drone surveillance, the column becomes a shooting gallery. Every minute spent pinned here bleeds Russian armor, elite crews, and tactical confidence. The battle is far from over when the vehicles halt. In fact, that is exactly when the costliest phase of the engagement begins. Each immobilized tank represents a multi-million-dollar asset targeted by a drone costing almost nothing to build. Once that lead tank is disabled, watch how Ukrainian FPV drones move in with a completely different objective. These drones do not need to challenge thick frontal armor. They can skim low along the tree line, pop up over the obstacle, and dive straight for vulnerable top armor, the engine deck, or gaps in the protective cage. This is where the attrition rate becomes brutal. A modern battle tank represents millions of dollars and invaluable, highly trained soldiers, plus fuel, logistics, and months of workshop labor. By contrast, a tactical drone costs just a few $100s. Yet one precise impact can turn that heavy machine into a useless blockade. The initial strike might not trigger a catastrophic explosion. It could disable the engine, shred the optics, or force a panic abandon. Regardless, the combat capability is instantly neutralized. An immobilized tank ceases to be an offensive breakthrough weapon. It is now a steel obstacle, a recovery hazard, and an anchor keeping the convoy under constant Ukrainian surveillance. If the hull survives the first blast, operators immediately send a follow-up strike. The second drone targets the exposed weakness, usually where fire, heat, or structural damage has cleared a path. This relentless, stacked pressure makes drone warfare devastating. Russia is not just losing armor to single, lucky hits. They face a deadly war of attrition, where cheap tools strike repeatedly until the target is destroyed. Intel shows tactical vulnerability is far worse across Russian tank fleets. The T-72, T-80, and T-90 platforms rely on autoloaders with high explosive rounds packed directly beneath the crew. While this low profile reduces radar cross-section and crew size, hull penetration triggers a fatal design flaw. When an FPV strike penetrates the thin turret roof, that blast path leads straight to the magazine. The internal payload ignites in a violent, unstoppable chain reaction, venting extreme overpressure straight up because there are no blowout panels. The multi-ton turret is instantly blasted skyward in a devastating jack-in-the-box explosion. For the crew trapped inside, survivability drops to absolute zero. But for Moscow, this attrition goes far beyond hardware losses. We are talking irreplaceable armor specialists, dead, critical combat units erased, and a logistical repair pipeline pushed to its absolute breaking point. This is why macro-level attrition matters, far beyond simple spreadsheet tracking on a screen. Satellite intel and battlefield surveillance confirm Russia has surrendered thousands of frontline main battle tanks, yet the raw numbers do not tell the whole story. The real crisis is the systemic degradation of quality. Modernized armor, veteran crews, and precision components cannot be replaced by dragging rusted Soviet-era hulls out of storage. Certainly, their defense industrial base can patch up wrecks and roll out legacy platforms. Make no mistake, their armored threat remains active, but modern battlefield realities are driving the operational cost sky high. In every failed offensive, Moscow trades multi-million-dollar armor for cheap, mass-produced drones, an asymmetric exchange favoring the force that keeps flooding the kill zone with low-cost precision munitions. Sustained minefields and kamikaze drone swarms are forcing a massive shift in Russian assault doctrine. We are seeing the near-total abandonment of large-scale armored columns in high-intensity sectors. When heavy armor is easily spotted, too costly to write off, and impossible to recover under fire, commanders are forced to shrink their signature. This explains why we now observe dispersed infantry cells, high-speed motorcycle squads, ATV teams, and light buggies darting across the gray zone. In the Pokrovsk sector, this tactical evolution defines the entire battle. Gone are the heavy breakthrough columns. Now, tiny assault elements leapfrog in desperate dashes through dense tree lines, shattered ruins, and cratered roads. A two-man motorcycle team sprints across a zero-line fire corridor and dives into defilade. Dismounted infantry follow behind, hauling ammunition crates, communication gear, and essential logistics. The tactical objective is clear. Minimize their signature to deny Ukrainian drone units any high-value concentrated targets, but do not mistake dispersion for safety. It simply shifts the lethality risk downward. A tank represents lost industrial capital, but a dismounted soldier has zero armor defense once targeted. A motorcycle offers speed, but zero protection against shrapnel, overpressure, or a direct hit. An ATV navigates tight terrain, but the moment it decelerates near an obstacle or bottleneck, it transforms into a slow-moving target on an operator's monitor. We are witnessing a brutal, decentralized war of attrition. The kill is no longer marked by a blazing tank chassis. It is a two-man fire team, vaporized in an open field, or a vital resupply element cut down miles from the front. It is a squad trapped in a cellar, hearing a loitering munition buzz just outside the door. While the scale of these assaults has shrunk, the lethality has become far more intimate. Ukrainian drone operators are scanning for far more than armored threats. They monitor supply trenches, tree-lined corridors, narrow alleyways, and staging areas, plus the dirt tracks used to haul water, rations, and radio batteries. Pause for 5 seconds, and you are locked in. A motorcycle taking a predictable return route is quickly tracked. One unarmored supply truck can easily compromise the entire forward operating position of the unit it serves. Furthermore, extreme dispersion degrades command and control. When assault squads scatter to survive, coordinating them becomes nearly impossible. On the ground, field commanders cannot risk exposing themselves to coordinate maneuvers. Radio silence is strict, as electronic emissions draw immediate counter-battery fire. If a lead element is pinned, adjacent units are left blind, unsure whether to push, hold, or retreat. The entire offensive disintegrates into isolated survival actions rather than a unified assault. Let us look at what demechanization actually looks like on the front lines right now. Moscow still fields heavy armor, and those tanks remain lethal when shielded by combined arms planning. But relentless drone interdiction is forcing assaults onto foot soldiers, motorcycles, and unarmored buggies, because heavy armor is easily spotted on predictable routes. Make no mistake, this lethal kill chain threatens everyone. This same tactical reality will devastate any unit advancing down an exposed corridor without mine. Clearing assets, electronic warfare, counter-drone shields, and active reconnaissance. The strategic takeaway is absolute. Tanks are not obsolete, but they cannot operate as isolated spearheads under drone-saturated skies. Heavy armor requires airborne eyes above, combat engineers clearing ahead, signal jammers active, and heavy artillery standing by to suppress ambushes before armor enters the kill zone. Lacking that integrated network, even a premier battle tank is just static metal waiting to be destroyed. The critical lesson here is not simply that thick mud stopped the Kremlin's armored columns. A modern armored regiment might look invincible on paper, but it disintegrates rapidly when the enemy controls the ground, the air, and the tempo. Rasputitsa mud forces heavy armor onto predictable choke points. Ukrainian aerial surveillance maps those avenues instantly. Hidden mines then paralyze the lead vehicle at the worst moment. This sequence seals their fate. An armored spearhead designed for rapid shock action is suddenly reduced to a stationary target. Every second those vehicles remain trapped, defenders have more time to coordinate the next devastating blow. Still, do not assume armor is dead. Tanks remain indispensable when integrated into defensive bubbles. The core issue is legacy doctrine, sending massive columns down exposed roads, relying purely on heavy armor and raw momentum to break the line. That doctrine is shattering on the Ukrainian front, and the next phase will be far more brutal. Russian forces will likely lean heavily into dismounted infantry, fast motorcycles, and small assault teams to curb vehicle attrition. The ultimate question remains unanswered. Which military can adapt faster to a theater where survival relies not on steel thickness, but on dominating the air, the roads, and timing? Tell us your analysis in the comments. Drop a like, share this with fellow defense analysts, and subscribe to Military Force as we continue to track the tactical and strategic shifts rewriting modern combat.